right now, because what you are about to hear is not speculation, not recycled headlines, and not the watered-down nonsense being spoon-fed by mainstream crypto media. This is the uncomfortable truth about XRP that powerful institutions would rather you never connect for yourself. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it because something is happening beneath the surface of XRP that feels quiet only because the real moves are never loud until it is already too late to react. And the question you should be asking yourself is why, at the exact moment, retail attention is being dragged toward memes, distractions, and short-term noise. XRP is being discussed behind closed doors in rooms that include the SEC, global banking representatives, IMF-linked conversations, and asset managers who do not gamble, they position. And if you think that is an exaggeration, then brace yourself because this changes everything. Right now, there is a widening gap between what the price is doing and what the infrastructure is preparing for, and historically, when that gap appears, it does not end quietly. It ends explosively. And here is the shocking part. Most XRP holders are still thinking too small, while BlackRock-level logic is thinking in decades, not days, and asking one brutal question: what happens when liquidity, regulation, and utility collide at the same moment? Before we go any further, if you want real XRP analysis that does not insult your intelligence, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications right now, because what comes next is exactly what long-term holders look back on and say, "I wish I paid attention sooner," and trust me, you do not want to be the person watching this unfold after the fact saying WTF just happened. The mainstream narrative wants you focused on price candles, but the real story is about positioning, about why Ripple keeps surviving regulatory pressure that would have annihilated weaker projects, about why XRP continues to be referenced in institutional liquidity discussions even when the headlines pretend it does not exist, and about why sudden silence from certain corners is not bearish at all, but historically precedes the most violent repricings in financial history. Ask yourself this extreme question and answer it honestly. If XRP was truly irrelevant, why is it still standing after years of legal attacks? Why is it still being name-dropped alongside conversations about cross-border settlement? And why do former regulators keep circling the ecosystem like sharks that smell blood? Because what is really going on with XRP is not about hype. It is about inevitability. And the people who understand that are not tweeting, they are preparing. Now, this is where the conversation separates casual observers from people who actually understand how financial power moves. Because the data trail around XRP does not scream retail speculation, it whispers institutional intent, and whispers are what you hear before thunder. Look at the pattern, not the headlines. Because while crypto media obsesses over daily volatility, the real signals are buried in regulatory language, infrastructure partnerships, and liquidity experiments that almost nobody bothers to connect. Ripple has been in constant dialogue with regulators while other projects actively avoid them, and that alone should trigger alarms in your mind, because since when do disruptive technologies get invited into the room unless they are being considered for integration rather than elimination? Former SEC officials, IMF-linked economists, and global banking consultants have all publicly acknowledged the inefficiencies of the current cross-border payment system, and at the same time, XRP remains one of the only digital assets purpose-built to solve that exact problem: fast settlement, low cost, and scalability at a level legacy systems cannot touch. So ask yourself, coincidence or coordination, when you hear institutions like the BIS discussing tokenized liquidity, and when BlackRock openly talks about the future of digital settlement layers, you are supposed to believe XRP is just sitting on the sidelines doing nothing? Or is it more realistic that the groundwork is being laid quietly while retail is distracted and emotionally exhausted? The XRP ledger continues to process transactions flawlessly while networks with louder marketing collapse under congestion, and that stability is boring to retail traders but priceless to institutions that move billions and cannot afford downtime. And that is why you see Ripple executives speaking at global finance events instead of Twitter Spaces, because credibility is built in boardrooms, not comment sections. Even the SEC case itself, which was meant to suffocate XRP, ended up doing something bizarre. It forced regulatory clarity discussions into the open and put XRP at the center of a legal precedent conversation that no other altcoin can claim. And whether you love or hate that reality, institutions crave clarity more than hype, and XRP has more of it than most. This is where the WTF moment should hit you, because the same system accused of holding XRP back may have inadvertently positioned it as one of the most legally battle-tested digital assets in existence. And history shows that assets that survive systemic attacks do not fade away. They resurface stronger when the environment changes. So when you see XRP price moving sideways while adoption conversations keep accelerating behind the scenes, understand that this divergence is not accidental. It is strategic, and the people who recognize it early are usually the ones who benefit the most when the curtain finally lifts. Honored insiders, this is the moment where fear is deliberately weaponized against you, because every major revaluation event in financial history was preceded by maximum confusion, maximum doubt, and perfectly timed FUD designed to shake out weak hands before the catalyst ignites. You have probably noticed it already. The recycled narratives, XRP is dead, Ripple is centralized, banks will never use it, regulators hate it, and yet somehow, despite all that noise, XRP keeps existing, building, integrating, and surviving in ways that should be statistically impossible if those narratives were true. So ask yourself this brutal question: why does the FUD never end if the threat is supposedly gone? The answer is simple and uncomfortable, because catalysts do not announce themselves. They emerge after positioning is complete, and what you are watching right now is the final phase of psychological exhaustion meant to make long-term holders question their own conviction right before utility flips the switch. Think about the timing: global liquidity discussions intensifying, tokenization pilots accelerating, central banks openly exploring digital settlement rails. And suddenly the loudest voices telling you XRP is finished are also the least capable of explaining how trillions will move efficiently across borders without something like it. This is where the conspiracy becomes logical, not emotional, because the same institutions that cannot publicly endorse a system before regulatory clarity are the ones quietly stress-testing alternatives behind closed doors, and Ripple's technology keeps appearing in those conversations whether critics like it or not. The so-called centralization argument collapses the moment you realize institutions demand accountability, upgrade paths, and governance. Chaos is for memes. Infrastructure is for money. And XRP was never built to entertain retail traders. It was built to move value at scale, and that truth scares people whose portfolios depend on hype cycles. Every delay, every sideways month, every negative headline functions as a filter, separating impatient speculators from participants who understand that adoption curves are not linear. They are silent until they are violent, and when that catalyst hits, whether it is regulatory finality, a major institutional corridor announcement, or a liquidity crisis that exposes legacy inefficiencies, there will be no rewind button. This is why the FUD feels louder now than ever, because the closer an asset gets to proving its purpose, the more aggressively doubt is deployed to keep you from holding it when the switch is flipped. Respected viewers, now let's confront the part everyone obsessed with charts misses entirely: the price justification, and why, when the real moves happen, the numbers will make your jaw drop. You see, XRP's current market price is a complete illusion when compared to the actual value being created behind the scenes. And this is not hyperbole. This is pure institutional math. Banks do not care about hype. They care about utility, settlement speed, and liquidity corridors. And XRP checks all the boxes, meaning when adoption announcements, liquidity channels, and cross-border integrations hit simultaneously, we are not talking about incremental gains. We are talking multiples that will make today's price look like pennies. Prepare for shock. XRP is being positioned not just as a transactional token, but as a backbone for the global financial plumbing, and institutions like Santander, SBI Holdings, and even unnamed BlackRock affiliates are watching closely, evaluating volumes, testing corridors, and waiting for regulatory clarity before they flood in. Because when trillions are at stake, they do not move in quietly, they move to dominate. This is why the sideways price action is a lie, a distraction, a calm before the storm, and only those who understand that patience is an edge will profit, because the market is not ready to price in what XRP is already accomplishing. Ask yourself this burning question. If XRP were merely speculative, why would the same institutions repeatedly stress test it? Why would Ripple be repeatedly invited to boardroom-level discussions? Why would central banks, IMF advisors, and global financial watchdogs keep returning to the same conversations, all while retail chatter obsessively debates price candles? The answer is brutal. It is inevitable. And if you are still waiting for confirmation from mainstream news, you are already behind. This is your final warning. The FUD will intensify, the noise will spike, and impatient traders will panic. But the real story, the utility, the infrastructure, and the institutional positioning is quietly aligning for what could be one of the most explosive repricings in crypto history, and only those who understand it will benefit. XRP is not just surviving, it is being systematically prepared to dominate global liquidity pathways. And when that reality hits the market, the scale will make previous all-time highs look insignificant, and every second spent doubting is a second lost in the biggest move most people never saw coming. Esteemed viewers, let's tie this together so there is no confusion left in your mind. What you have witnessed in this video is the hidden story of XRP, a narrative carefully obscured by mainstream media, amplified FUD, and retail distraction, but entirely clear to anyone willing to connect the dots between regulatory developments, institutional positioning, and real-world adoption. XRP is not a gamble. It is a system, a mechanism, a tool quietly being integrated into corridors of liquidity that will define the next era of cross-border finance. And the same forces that have tried to suppress it, SEC pressure, market manipulation, negative headlines, have only strengthened it legally, technologically, and strategically. Your task as a viewer is simple yet urgent. Understand the divergence between perception and reality. Prepare mentally and financially for the catalyst that is coming, and stop letting the noise dictate your decisions, because while others panic or debate trivialities, the foundations of the XRP surge are being laid quietly, methodically, and irreversibly. Remember, every major financial shift in history rewards those who see it before it becomes obvious, and XRP is screaming that signal in ways most refuse to recognize. Do not wait for confirmation from sources that profit from your ignorance. The moment to act is now. The clarity is here, and the opportunity is real. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and most importantly, trust the data, trust the adoption, and trust the inevitability. XRP is not just a coin. It is the prelude to a seismic transformation in global finance.